Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk to you tonight about the inflation rate in Australia, worse than expected, problem not solved, and then talk about the causes of inflation, excessive government spending and debt accumulation, and of course, the Reserve Bank of Australia. Then, in a series of short videos, I will look at the $57 billion budget blowout at the federal level. And then the promises that they're going to borrow money for 10 years, accumulate debt, but in 10 years time they'll stop borrowing money. We'll look back at how that worked out from 20 years ago, what they thought they'd be spending today, what they thought government debt would be. Firstly, let's look at Australia's inflation number out today. Inflation worse than expected, adding to the expectation that the Reserve Bank of Australia will need to raise interest rates. If you've been following me for a while, I've talked about how the Reserve Bank creates inflation, how they didn't raise interest rates high enough in 2022 to stop inflation. And then, of course, when they started cutting rates, I talked about how the inflation problem was not solved and they were cutting rates too soon. And we're starting to get further data to support my thesis. Australia's inflation rate rose to 3.8% for the 12 months of 2025. If we have a look at rental inflation, keeping in mind that for people who rent, they spend 33% of their income to rent property. So it's a big part of their household budget, their expense. The Australian Bureau of Statistics we're looking at here, they have rental inflation falling and they're indicating that rents only went up 3.9% last year. This would be an example of one of the ways the government lies to you about inflation. If we have a look at this chart here, and this ends in 2025, but the point is valid, this would be an example of how the government underreports inflation. So if we look at CoreLogic, advertised rents from the start of 2020 to mid 2025, early 2025, went up about 45% as per this graph. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported rents only went up about 17 or 18%. And of course, CPI, they reported at roughly sort of 20% increase. So rents went up more than double what the government reported in their CPI calculations and in their official rental data, which we just looked at on the Australian Bureau of Statistics website. Of course, we're looking at the RBA website here, and we can see that the RBA deliberately tries to create at least 2% inflation per year. And this graph goes back to the 1950s, and we can see almost at no point in history has your cost of living ever fallen. It's always going up. And now let's have a look at some different